lonely rancher married a pregnant stranger. Not knowing the baby's father was his own brother, she walked through the morning mist carrying a baby with green eyes, and Jacob offered shelter without asking questions. Those green eyes would destroy everything he thought he knew about family. The morning came gray and cold, like most mornings did on Jacob's ranch. He stood at his kitchen window, coffee growing cold in his hands, watching the mist roll across the empty fields. 3 years of silence had taught him to notice small things. The way shadows moved. The sound his boots made on wooden floors. The echo of his own voice when he talked to the horses. He was about to turn away when he saw her. A figure moving through the mist like a ghost. Small and bent forward, carrying something heavy. Jacob squinted through the glass, his breath fogging the window. Not something heavy. Someone small. A woman. With a child. His coffee cup hit the counter harder than he meant it to. The sound rang through the empty house like a gunshot. Jacob hadn't seen another soul in 2 months. Not since old Pete from town brought supplies and stayed just long enough to drink whiskey and complain about his wife. The woman walked slow, like each step hurt. Her dress was dark blue, or had been once. Now it looked more like the color of old bruises. She held the child close to her chest, wrapped in what might have been a blanket. From this distance, Jacob couldn't tell if the child was awake or sleeping. He opened the door before she reached the porch. The morning air hit him cold and sharp. It carried the smell of rain coming, and something else. Something that made him think of roads and dust and places left behind. The woman stopped at the bottom of his steps. She looked up at him with eyes that held too much knowing. "I'm sorry to trouble you," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I saw the smoke from your chimney." Jacob looked at her face. Really looked. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair that had come loose from whatever had been holding it back. There were lines around her eyes that shouldn't have been there yet. Lines that came from crying or squinting in his sun, or both. "No trouble," he said. The words felt strange in his mouth. He hadn't used them in so long. The child in her arms stirred. A baby, Jacob realized. Maybe 6 months old, with dark hair like his mother's. The baby opened his eyes and looked right at Jacob. Green eyes. Bright green like spring grass after rain. Something twisted in Jacob's chest. Those eyes reminded him of someone, but he couldn't place who. "Are you hurt?" Jacob asked. The woman shook her head, but Jacob saw the way she favored her left foot. Saw how her hands shook slightly from cold or fear or tiredness. "Just tired," she said. "We've been walking since before dawn." "From where?" She didn't answer right away. The baby made a small sound, not crying, just letting the world know he was there. The woman bounced him gently, the way mothers do without thinking. "East," she said finally. "From back east." That could mean anything. The next town over, or clear back to Missouri. Jacob didn't press. A man learned not to ask too many questions out here. People came west to leave things behind, not to talk about them. "You hungry?" he asked instead. The woman's eyes filled with something that might have been gratitude or might have been relief. She nodded. "Both of us," she said, "if you don't mind." Jacob stepped aside and held the door open. The woman climbed the steps slowly, like someone who hadn't slept in days. As she passed him, Jacob caught a smell of soap and something sweeter. Apple blossoms, maybe. It had been so long since his house smelled like anything but coffee and leather and loneliness. "Name's Jacob," he said as she stepped inside. "Mary," she replied, looking around his kitchen. "And this is Samuel." The baby, Samuel, turned his head at the sound of his name. Those green eyes found Jacob again, curious and unafraid. Jacob felt that twist in his chest again, stronger this time. "Sit," Jacob said, pulling out a chair from his small table. "I'll get something started." Mary sat down carefully, settling Samuel on her lap. The baby reached for the table edge, his small fingers grabbing at nothing. Mary caught his hands gently and kissed the top of his head. Jacob watched them while he worked. The way Mary's hand moved in circles on the baby's back. The way she whispered things too quiet to hear. The way Samuel leaned into her touch like he knew he was safe. Jacob hadn't realized how empty his house was until it had people in it. He scrambled eggs and fried bacon, made fresh coffee and warmed milk for the baby. The sounds of cooking filled the silence. Oil popping, coffee bubbling, the soft clink of fork against pan. Normal sounds. Sounds that made the house feel alive. "You live here alone?" Mary asked. Jacob nodded, not looking up from the stove. 3 years now. It's a nice place. Jacob looked around his kitchen, trying to see it through her eyes. Clean enough. Organized. But empty. No pictures on the walls. No flowers on the table. No signs that anyone had ever laughed or cried or lived within these walls. "It's quiet," he said. Mary bounced Samuel on her knee. The baby gurgled and reached for her face. She let him grab her finger, and Jacob saw her smile for the first time. A real smile that changed everything about her face. "Quiet can be good," she said. "Sometimes." Jacob set a plate in front of her. Eggs and bacon and biscuits left over from yesterday. Mary looked at the food like she couldn't quite believe it was real. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was thick with something that might have been tears. Jacob poured coffee for both of them and sat down across the table. Samuel reached for his cup, and Jacob moved it away gently. "He's curious," Jacob said. "Gets it from his father," Mary said, then stopped. Her face went still, like she'd said something she hadn't meant to. Jacob waited, but she didn't say anything else. He understood. Some stories weren't ready to be told. They ate in comfortable silence. Mary fed Samuel small bits of biscuit soaked in warm milk. The baby made happy sounds and got more food on his clothes than in his mouth. Mary cleaned his face with her sleeve, patient and gentle. Outside, the mist was burning off. The sun painted everything gold, the fields, the barn, the fence posts that needed fixing. It was going to be a beautiful day. "Where are you headed?" Jacob asked when Mary had eaten everything on her plate. Mary looked out the window at the golden morning. Samuel had fallen asleep in her arms, his small fist curled around her finger. "I don't know," she said quietly. "Somewhere safe." Jacob looked at her torn dress, her tired eyes, the way she held her baby like the world might try to take him away. He thought about his empty house, his quiet mornings, the way her laugh might sound echoing through the rooms. "You could stay," he said. The words came out before he could stop them. "For a while. Until you figure things out." Mary looked at him sharply, searching his face for something. Jacob kept his expression open, honest. He wasn't asking for anything except the chance not to be alone. "I don't have money to pay you," she said. "Didn't ask for money. I don't know you. I don't know you either." They looked at each other across the table. Samuel slept between them, trusting and warm. Outside, a meadowlark sang from the fence post, clear and sweet. "What?" Mary asked finally. Jacob thought about the answer. About his brother Thomas, gone 2 years now without a word. About the silence that had become his closest companion. About the way his house felt bigger and smaller at the same time when it was just him rattling around inside it. "Because everyone needs somewhere safe," he said. Mary's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. She looked down at Samuel, then back at Jacob. "Just for a while," she said. Jacob nodded. "Just for a while." But even as he said it, something in his chest settled into place. Something that had been restless for a long time. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what kind of life might grow within its walls. The days shortened like held breath, and Mary learned the rhythm of Jacob's ranch. She woke before dawn to Samuel's soft crying, fed him while Jacob milked the cow, made coffee strong and black the way he liked it, watched him eat breakfast in silence, his eyes always moving to the window, checking the sky for weather. Jacob was a man of few words, but Mary learned to read the things he didn't say. The way he set his hat on his head meant he'd be working the north fence. The way he lingered over his coffee meant he was thinking about something heavy. The way he looked at Samuel, quick glances when he thought she wasn't watching, meant something was stirring in his heart. Samuel grew stronger. His laugh filled the quiet spaces between them like music. He learned to sit up on his own, to grab Jacob's finger when a man got too close. Those green eyes followed Jacob around the kitchen, curious and trusting. "He likes you," Mary said one morning, watching Jacob make silly faces at the baby. Jacob stopped mid-face and looked embarrassed, just being friendly. But Mary saw how Jacob's shoulders relaxed when Samuel smiled at him, saw how he saved the softest pieces of bread for the baby's breakfast, saw how he carved a small wooden horse from scraps and left it where Samuel could reach it. The work was hard but honest. Mary mended Jacob's shirts by lamplight, her needle moving steady and sure. She cooked beans and cornbread and whatever vegetables were left in the garden before frost. She swept the floors and washed the windows and made the house feel lived in. Jacob never asked her to do these things. She just did them the way water finds its level, the way two people learn to move around each other without bumping into walls. September turned cold early. The leaves on the cottonwoods went yellow all at once, like someone had spilled paint across the valley. Jacob spent long days cutting firewood, his axe ringing sharp against the silence. Mary watched him from the window, the way his shoulders moved under his shirt, the way he paused to wipe sweat from his face. He was a good man, quiet but good. He deserved better than secrets. October brought the first frost. Mary found ice in the water bucket and knew winter was coming fast. Too fast. She wrapped Samuel in extra blankets and worried about the cold months ahead. "Storm's coming," Jacob said one evening, looking out at clouds that hung low and heavy. "Big one." Mary bounced Samuel on her hip and watched the sky. It looked angry, full of snow and wind and long dark nights. "How big?" she asked. "Big enough to keep us inside for days." That night, the wind picked up. It rattled the windows and found every crack in the walls. Mary lay in the small room Jacob had given her, listening to the house creak and groan. Samuel slept beside her, warm and peaceful. She envied him his innocence. The snow started before dawn. By breakfast, it was coming down thick and steady, erasing the world beyond the porch. Jacob stood at the window with his coffee, watching his ranch disappear under white. "We'll need more wood," he said, "and the animals will need extra feed." Mary nodded and dressed Samuel warm. They spent the day preparing for the siege of winter, moving firewood to the porch, checking the root cellar for supplies, making sure the barn was tight against the cold. The snow kept falling. By evening, it was knee-deep and still coming. The wind howled like something alive and angry. Jacob banked the fire high and checked the windows for drafts. "This could last for days," he said. Mary looked around the small house. One main room with a kitchen and fireplace. Jacob's bedroom, the tiny room where she slept with Samuel. No place to hide if tempers grew short or if the walls started closing in. "We'll manage," she said. But Jacob was thinking about more than just a few days trapped inside. He was thinking about the whole winter ahead, about what people in town would say about a single woman living on his ranch, about what would happen if someone got sick or hurt with no way to get help. He was thinking about Samuel, who needed warmth and food and safety. He was thinking about Mary, who worked beside him like a partner, but slept alone like a stranger. That night, after Samuel was asleep and the wind was throwing snow against the windows like handfuls of rice, Jacob cleared his throat. "Mary," he said. His voice sounded strange in the firelight. "I've been thinking." Mary looked up from her mending. The needle paused in her fingers. "About what?" Jacob stared into the fire. The words felt heavy in his mouth, like stones he had to push uphill. "About winter. About you and Samuel being here. About what that means." Mary set down her sewing. Something in his voice made her heart beat faster. "It's not proper," Jacob said quietly. "You being here, not married. People talk. I don't care what people think. You should, for Samuel's sake." Mary looked at her sleeping baby, his small face peaceful in the lamplight. Jacob was right. A woman alone with a child needed protection, needed respectability, needed a name that meant something. "What are you saying?" she asked. Jacob turned from the fire to look at her. His face was serious, honest, the face of a man making a hard choice for good reasons. "I'm saying we should get married." The words hung in the air between them. Outside, the wind screamed and the snow kept falling. "You don't love me," Mary said. "No," Jacob said, "but I respect you, and you work hard, and Samuel needs a father." Mary felt tears prick her eyes. Not because he didn't love her, but because his honesty was its own kind of kindness. "I don't love you either," she whispered. "I know." They looked at each other across the small room. The fire crackled and popped. Samuel made a soft sound in his sleep. "But we could take care of each other," Jacob said. "Make a good life. Give Samuel a home." Mary thought about the long winter ahead, about the years after that, about the secret she carried like a stone in her chest, about the green eyes that followed Jacob around the room, so trusting, so innocent. "Just for practical reasons," she said. "Just for practical reasons." Mary picked up her sewing again, but her hands were shaking. "When?" "Now," Jacob said. "Tonight, before the storm gets worse. There's no preacher. Don't need one. Just need words spoken honest." Mary looked at Samuel, then at Jacob. This good, quiet man who offered shelter without asking for explanations. Who deserved better than the truth she couldn't tell him. "All right," she said. Jacob stood up and walked to the mantel. He came back with his mother's Bible, old and worn from years of reading. "Stand up," he said gently. Mary rose on unsteady legs. They faced each other in front of the fire, the Bible open in Jacob's hands. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, everything was still and golden and hushed. Jacob, take you, Mary, as my wife," he said. His voice was quiet but sure. "To have and to hold, through whatever comes." Mary's voice caught the first time she tried to speak. She cleared her throat and tried again. Mary, take you, Jacob, as my husband. To have and to hold, through whatever comes." Jacob closed the Bible. They looked at each other, husband and wife now, bound by words and need and the weight of winter pressing down on the roof above them. "That's it then," Jacob said. "That's it." But neither of them moved. The fire cast dancing shadows on the walls. The wind rattled the windows. Samuel slept on, innocent of the promises made above his head. Mary wondered if Jacob could hear her heart beating. Wondered if he knew that she was thinking about another man, another pair of green eyes, another promise broken in another lifetime. Jacob wondered if he'd done the right thing. If Mary would ever look at him the way she looked at Samuel. If the loneliness would finally stop gnawing at his ribs like a hungry animal. Neither of them spoke of love or hope or the future that stretched ahead like an uncharted territory. They were married now. That would have to be enough. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it came all at once. The snow melted fast, turning the creek into a rushing torrent. The grass pushed up green and eager through the mud. Samuel took his first steps across the kitchen floor, stumbling from Mary's arms into Jacob's waiting hands. "Look at him go," Jacob said, his face lit up with pride that felt as natural as breathing. Mary watched her husband catch their son, because that's what Samuel had become in all the ways that mattered. Jacob had taught the boy to clap his hands and wave goodbye, had carved him toys from pine scraps, and sung him to sleep with old songs his own father had sung. Samuel's first word had been "Papa," clear and bright, reaching for Jacob's face. The winter had been kind to them. Long nights by the fire, Jacob reading aloud from newspapers while Mary mended and Samuel played on the floor between them. They had learned each other's rhythms, each other's silences. Jacob made Mary laugh with his dry observations about the weather. Mary made Jacob smile by humming while she cooked. They shared a bed now, but gently, carefully, like two people learning a dance they'd never been taught. Jacob was patient, tender. He never pushed or demanded. Mary came to him slowly, the way trust grows, one small choice at a time. She almost believed they could be happy. It was a Tuesday in early May when Thomas came home. Mary was hanging laundry on the line behind the house, Samuel toddling around her feet, chasing chickens and squealing with delight. Jacob was in the far pasture, checking fence posts damaged by winter storms. The morning was clear and warm, full of promise. She heard the horse first, the steady rhythm of hooves on hard-packed earth, Samuel heard it too and stopped chasing the chickens to look toward the sound. Mary shaded her eyes with her hand and looked down the long drive that led to the main road. A rider was coming fast, dust rising behind him like smoke. Something about the way he sat his horse made her heart start beating faster. The rider was still too far away to make out clearly, but Mary felt a cold finger trace down her spine. She picked up Samuel and held him close, breathing in his warm, innocent smell. "It's all right, baby," she whispered, but the words felt like lies in her mouth. The rider came closer. Closer. Mary could see his face now, shadowed under the brim of his hat. Could see the familiar set of his shoulders, the way his hands held the reins. Her legs nearly gave out. Thomas, 2 years older, leaner, with a beard that couldn't hide the sharp line of his jaw. But the same green eyes, the same crooked smile that had once made her forget everything else in the world. The same man who had promised to come back for her and never did. Samuel wiggled in her arms, pointing at the approaching rider. "Horse," he said clearly, one of his newest words. Thomas pulled up in front of the house and swung down from his saddle. His eyes found Mary immediately, pinning her in place like a butterfly on a board. Well, he said, his voice exactly as she remembered it. Smooth as honey, dangerous as a rattlesnake's warning. "Look what little brother's got himself." Mary couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Samuel reached toward Thomas, curious and unafraid. Thomas stepped closer, and Mary saw the exact moment when he really looked at the child in her arms. Saw his face change as he took in Samuel's dark hair, his bright green eyes, the shape of his nose and chin. "Jesus Christ, Thomas whispered." "Don't," Mary said, finding her voice at last. "Don't you dare." But Thomas wasn't listening. He was staring at Samuel like he was seeing a ghost. Like he was looking into a mirror that reflected not his face, but his soul. "How old is he?" Thomas asked, his voice gone quiet and dangerous. Mary held Samuel tighter. "That's none of your business." "The hell it's not." Thomas took another step closer. "How old, Mary?" Before she could answer, they heard Jacob's voice from across the yard. "Thomas." Mary turned to see her husband walking toward them, his face a mixture of surprise and something else. Relief, maybe, or joy. Jacob had missed his brother, had worried about him during the long, silent months. "Jacob," Thomas called out, but his eyes never left Mary and Samuel. "Good to see you, brother." Jacob picked up his pace, crossing the yard with long, eager strides. He reached them breathless and smiling, ready to embrace the brother he'd thought he might never see again. "Where the hell have you been?" Jacob asked, but he was grinning. 2 years without a word. "California," Thomas said. "Gold country. Made some money, lost some money. You know how it is." Jacob clapped Thomas on the shoulder, then turned to Mary with pride shining in his eyes. "Thomas, meet my wife, Mary. And this is Samuel." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Thomas looked at Jacob. Jacob looked at Thomas. Mary stood between them, holding Samuel like a shield against the storm she could feel building. "Your wife," Thomas repeated slowly. "Married last winter," Jacob said. His voice was starting to carry a note of confusion. Something in Thomas's face was wrong. Something in the way he was looking at Mary and Samuel. Thomas laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Married? Well, ain't that something?" Samuel chose that moment to reach toward Thomas again, babbling happily. Thomas stared at the boy's outstretched hand, at his green eyes, at his bright, innocent smile. "He looks familiar," Thomas said quietly. Jacob frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean he's got the family eyes, brother. The same green eyes we both got from Pa." The words hit Jacob like a physical blow. Mary watched her husband's face change as understanding began to dawn. Watched him look from Thomas to Samuel to her, the pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. "No," Jacob said. His voice was barely a whisper. Thomas stepped closer to Mary, ignoring Jacob completely. "Tell him, Mary. Tell him whose boy this really is." "Stop," Mary begged. "Please, Thomas. Don't do this." But Thomas was like a man possessed, driven by 2 years of guilt and rage, and something that might have been love twisted into its ugliest form. Tell him how you came to me when you found out you were carrying. Tell him how you begged me to take you away from that shack you were living in. Tell him how I promised I would, and then ran like a coward when the gold fever hit. Jacob was staring at Samuel now, really seeing him for the first time. Seeing the green eyes, the shape of his face, the way he moved his hands. Seeing his brother in every gesture, every expression. He's yours, Jacob said. It wasn't a question. Thomas nodded. Mine. And I left him. Left them both. Mary felt the world tilt under her feet. Samuel was babbling happily, reaching for Jacob now, calling Papa in his sweet, clear voice. Jacob's hands hung at his sides, empty. You knew, Jacob said to Mary. His voice was hollow, destroyed. All this time you knew. Mary couldn't deny it. Couldn't lie anymore. The truth was written all over Samuel's face, in his green eyes and crooked smile. I knew, she whispered. Jacob staggered backward like she'd struck him. The pain in his eyes was worse than any physical blow could have been. You let me. He started, then stopped. Started again. You let me love him. Love you. You let me think. I never meant for this to happen, Mary said, tears streaming down her face. I never meant to hurt you. But you did it anyway. Jacob's voice was getting stronger, harder. You married me knowing I was raising my brother's bastard. You let me call him son. He's your son, Mary said desperately. In every way that matters. You're the one who taught him to walk, to laugh. You're the only father he's ever known. Jacob looked at Samuel, who was still reaching for him, still calling Papa in confusion. The love and pain warring in Jacob's face was terrible to watch. Get out, Jacob said quietly. Jacob, please, both of you. Get out of my house. Thomas stepped forward. Now wait a minute, brother. I came back to make things right. To take responsibility. Jacob turned on him with fury that had been building for 2 years of loneliness, 2 years of missing his brother, 2 years of building a life on lies. Responsibility? You ran off and left a pregnant woman with nothing. You didn't send word, didn't send money, didn't give a damn what happened to them. And now you want to talk about responsibility? I was young. I was stupid. I'm here now. 2 years too late. The brothers faced each other across the yard. 28 years of shared history crackling between them like lightning. Same green eyes, same stubborn jaw, same quick temper that ran in their father's blood. Samuel started to cry, sensing the anger and fear swirling around him. Mary bounced him gently, whispering comfort, but her own tears were falling freely now. I love him, Jacob said suddenly, looking at Samuel. God help me. I love that boy like he was my own blood. He is your blood, Thomas said. He's your nephew, your family. Family. Jacob's laugh was bitter as burned coffee. You want to talk about family? Family doesn't run. Family doesn't abandon people who need them. Family doesn't come back after 2 years and destroy everything good that's been built from the pieces you left behind. Thomas flinched like Jacob had hit him. I know I messed up. I know I hurt people. But I'm trying to fix it now. You can't fix this, Jacob said. Some things, once broken, don't go back together. Mary stood between the brothers, holding Samuel, feeling like her heart was being torn in two. She had loved them both in different ways at different times. Had hurt them both with her choices and her secrets. What do you want from me, Thomas? She asked. Thomas looked at her with those green eyes that had haunted her dreams. I want us to be a family. You, me, Samuel, the way it should have been from start. And what about Jacob? Jacob will find someone else. Someone who can give him children that are actually his. Jacob made a sound like a wounded animal. Mary saw him step backward, away from them, away from the wreckage of everything he'd thought was real. I won't go with you, Mary said quietly. Thomas stared at her. What? I said I won't go with you. I'm married to Jacob. I made vows. I meant them. You can't mean that. Not after everything we meant to each other. Mary looked at Jacob, standing apart from them, his face a mask of pain and betrayal. Then she looked at Thomas, handsome and charming and dangerous as he'd always been. What we meant to each other was a long time ago, she said. Before you left. Before I learned what kind of man you really are. Thomas's face darkened. And what kind of man is that? The kind who runs when things get hard. The kind who makes promises he doesn't keep. The kind who shows up 2 years late, expecting forgiveness and gratitude. The words hit Thomas like slaps. He stepped closer, his voice dropping low and mean. And Jacob? What kind of man is Jacob? The kind who marries his brother's leavings? The kind who raises another man's bastard and calls it love? Jacob moved faster than Mary had ever seen him move. His fist caught Thomas square in the jaw, sending him staggering backward. Thomas recovered quickly, launching himself at his brother with a roar of rage. They went down in a tangle of fists and fury, rolling in the dirt, 28 years of brotherhood exploding into violence. Mary backed away, shielding Samuel from the sight of the two men she cared about trying to destroy each other. When they finally broke apart, both brothers were bleeding. Thomas's lip was split. Jacob's knuckles were scraped raw. They stood facing each other, breathing hard, years of love and resentment hanging heavy in the air between them. "I'm done," Jacob said finally. His voice was flat, empty. "I'm done with both of you." He turned and walked toward the house, leaving Mary and Thomas standing in the yard with Samuel crying between them, and the weight of broken promises settling like dust on everything they'd ever meant to each other. Thomas left at dawn, the same way he'd arrived, fast and hard, leaving dust and silence in his wake. Mary watched from a kitchen window as he mounted his horse, his saddlebags packed with the few things Jacob had thrown at him the night before. Thomas looked back once at the house, his green eyes finding her face in the glass. Then he spurred his horse and rode away, disappearing into the morning mist like he'd never been there at all. Except everything was different now. Jacob hadn't come to bed. Mary had lain awake listening to his footsteps on the porch, the creak of the rocking chair, the soft sounds of a man trying to piece his world back together. Samuel had slept beside her, innocent of the storm raging around him, his small fist curled around her finger. Now, Jacob sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of cold coffee. His knuckles were still scraped from the fight, his jaw dark with bruise. He looked older than he had yesterday, like the truth had aged him years in a single afternoon. Mary poured fresh coffee and set it in front of him. He didn't look up. "Thank you," he said quietly. They were the first words he'd spoken to her since Thomas rode away. Samuel sat on the floor between them, playing with the wooden horse Jacob had carved months ago. He pushed it across the boards, making soft horse sounds, oblivious to the careful distance his parents were keeping from each other. "Papa," Samuel said, looking up at Jacob with bright, trusting eyes. "Horse." Jacob's face crumpled. He covered it with his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Mary wanted to go to him, to put her arms around him and tell him it would be all right. But she didn't know if it would be. Didn't know if he could ever forgive her. Didn't know if she deserved forgiveness. Samuel crawled over to Jacob's chair and pulled himself up on unsteady legs. He patted Jacob's knee with his small hand, offering comfort the only way he knew how. "Papa sad?" he asked. Jacob looked down at the boy, this child who wasn't his son but felt like his heart walking around outside his body. Samuel's green eyes were full of concern, his little face serious. "Yeah, baby," Jacob whispered. "Papa's sad." Samuel held up the wooden horse. "Horse make Papa happy." Jacob's laugh came out broken, half sob and half smile. He lifted Samuel onto his lap, holding him close. "Yeah," he said, "horse makes Papa happy." Mary felt tears slide down her cheeks. Watching them together was like looking at love in its purest form, complicated and painful and absolutely real. They spent the morning in careful silence, moving around each other like strangers sharing space. Mary cooked breakfast. Jacob ate without tasting. Samuel played and napped and woke up asking for Papa and Mama like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. That afternoon, while Samuel slept, Jacob finally spoke. "I keep trying to hate him," he said, not looking at Mary. "The boy. I keep trying to see Thomas when I look at his face." Mary's hands stilled on the shirt she was mending. "And do you?" See, Thomas? Sometimes. Jacob's voice was raw, but then he laughs, or he reaches for me, or he calls me Papa, and I just see Samuel. Just see this little boy who needs someone to love him. He does love you, Mary said softly. You're the only father he's ever known. But I'm not his father, am I? Jacob looked at her then, his eyes full of pain. I'm his uncle. His father is the man who ran off and left you both. Blood doesn't make a father, Mary said. Love does. Showing up does. Being there when it matters. Jacob was quiet for a long time. Outside, a meadowlark sang from the fence post. The same song it had sung when Mary first arrived, back when everything was simple and full of possibility. Why didn't you tell me? Jacob asked finally. Mary had been dreading this question, but she owed him the truth. All of it. At first, I was afraid you'd send me away. Samuel and I had nowhere else to go. No money, no family. I was desperate. And later, after we were married, Mary set down her mending and looked at her hands. Later, I was afraid you'd hate me. Hate us. I saw how much you loved Samuel, how happy you were. I didn't want to destroy that. So you let me live a lie. I'll let you live a life where you were happy. Where Samuel had a father who loved him. Where I had a husband who was kind to me. Mary's voice broke. Maybe it started as a lie, but it didn't feel like one. Not after a while. Jacob stood up and walked to the window. The afternoon sun slanted across his face, highlighting the lines that hadn't been there before Thomas came home. Do you love him? He asked. Thomas. Mary thought about the question. About the girl she'd been 2 years ago, dazzled by Thomas's charm and promises. About the woman she'd become, learning to find peace in Jacob's quiet strength. I thought I did, she said, but I was young and scared, and he seemed like salvation. What I felt for him wasn't love. It was desperation dressed up pretty. And me? Jacob's voice was barely a whisper. Do you love me? The question hung in the air between them. Mary looked at this good man who had given her shelter when she needed it most, who had married her for practical reasons but treated her with tenderness, who had loved Samuel like his own from the very beginning. Yes, she said simply, I love you. Jacob turned from the window to study her face. Even though I'm not the charming one, not the exciting one, because you're not those things. Because you're steady and honest, and you keep your promises. Because you make me feel safe. Safe, Jacob repeated. Not passionate. Not desperate. Just safe. Don't say it like it's not enough, Mary said fiercely. Do you know how precious safe is? Do you know how rare it is to find someone who won't run when things get hard? Jacob came back to the table and sat down across from her. And what about Samuel? What do we tell him when he's older? When he asks questions? Mary had thought about this through the long, sleepless night. We tell him the truth, that his birth father couldn't be there, but his real father chose to love him anyway. That sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're... And if Thomas comes back again, then we deal with it together. Mary reached across the table and took Jacob's scarred hands in hers. If you want to, if you can forgive me. Jacob looked down at their joined hands. Mary's were small and work rough. His were bigger, stronger, marked with years of honest labor. I don't know if I can, he said honestly. Not right away. Trust takes time to heal, like a broken bone. I know, but I can't let Samuel suffer for the mistakes adults made. He didn't choose this. He's innocent. Mary nodded, tears falling onto their clasped hands. From the bedroom came the sound of Samuel waking up, chattering to himself in the half-words and full sentences he was just learning. Soon he would call for them, expecting his parents to come running with smiles and hugs and the security of absolute love. What do we do now? Mary asked. Jacob squeezed her hands. We choose, he said. Every day we choose. We choose to stay. We choose to work on this marriage. We choose to love that little boy, no matter whose blood runs in his veins. And us? Our marriage. Jacob was quiet for a moment, thinking, it won't be the same as it was. We'll have to build something new from what's left. Something stronger. Something based on truth this time. Yeah. Truth and choice and the decision to keep loving even when it's hard. Samuel's voice carried from the bedroom, calling for them. "Mama, Papa." Mary started to get up, but Jacob stopped her. "Mary," he said, "I need you to understand something. I may forgive you in time, but if you ever lie to me again about anything, this ends. I can work with broken trust, but I can't live with ongoing deception." "Understand," Mary said. "No more secrets. No more secrets." Samuel appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, dragging his blanket behind him. He saw his parents at the table and smiled, that brilliant smile that could light up the darkest corners of any room. "Mama and Papa," he said happily, toddles over to them. Jacob lifted him onto his lap, and Mary saw something settle in her husband's face. A decision made. A path chosen. "Hey there, little man," Jacob said, his voice warm with love. "Did you have a good nap?" Samuel nodded and snuggled against Jacob's chest. "Papa sing." Jacob looked at Mary over Samuel's head. In his eyes, she saw pain and forgiveness and the enormous weight of love that chooses to stay even when staying hurts. "Yeah," Jacob said softly. "Papa will sing." He began to hum an old lullaby, the same one he'd sung to Samuel every night for months. Samuel closed his eyes and listened, safe in the arms of the man who had chosen to be his father. Mary watched them together and felt hope stir in her chest like a bird taking wing. They had a long road ahead of them, full of hard conversations and careful rebuilding. There would be days when the hurt was too fresh, when the betrayal felt too big to carry. But there would also be mornings when Samuel laughed at breakfast, evenings when Jacob's hand found hers across the table, nights when they chose each other again despite everything that had gone wrong. Love, Mary was learning, wasn't the wild, desperate thing she'd felt for Thomas. It wasn't built on passion or pretty promises or the thrill of being wanted. Real love was quieter than that. Stronger. It was Jacob holding Samuel, even though it hurt to see Thomas's eyes looking back at him. It was staying when leaving would be easier. It was choosing family not because of blood or law, but because some bonds are worth fighting. Outside, the sun was setting over the ranch, painting the sky gold and pink and purple. The meadowlark sang its evening song. The cattle moved slow and peaceful toward the barn. And inside, a family that had been broken was learning how to heal. Not perfectly, maybe not completely, but with the patient hope of people who understood that love is not a feeling you fall into. It's a promise you keep making one day at a time, for as long as you have breath to make it.